Let's build and prime Daemons of Slaanesh from Warhammer Age of Sigmar. This set has been sitting in my collection for a very long time, and I finally decided it is time to stop admiring the box and actually do something with it. In this video, I will take you through how I assembled the miniatures, built custom bases using milliput, and finally how I primed everything with an airbrush. So let's get into it. In the rules sheet, we can see what a unit actually is and what it contains. In this case, a unit includes 1 allure and 9 demonettes. Basically, this is my reference point, so I know what parts I need, how many I need, and what the finished unit should look like. Next, I move on to sorting all the parts. I keep my miniatures organized in compartments, and here I'm separating them out. Bodies, arms, heads, claws. There are a lot of tiny pieces here, and I mean tiny, so keeping everything organized is the only way to stay sane in my case. This is where I decided what potential options I have for heads and claws and which ones I'm going to go with. Just a little backstory. I painted some of these models years ago, and now I think I can do better. So first, I had to remove the old paint. I used 100% isopropyl alcohol, soaked the miniatures for about 30 minutes, and brushed the paint off with a toothbrush. Now, if your miniatures are as petite as mine, you want to be gentle with brushing, otherwise the parts you glued previously gonna come off, and you have to glue them back on. Just to give you an idea, here's a comparison between my Slaanesh army and my husband's Space Wolves. As you can see, the points that need to be glued are much smaller for me compared to his bulky army. Once they were clean and dry, they were ready to be rebuilt. Before committing with glue for the few miniatures that I hadn't assembled previously, I used Blu-Tack to test poses. This allowed me to try different arm angles, adjust head directions, and see what looks good before anything becomes permanent. It's basically my try before you glue stage. Highly recommended before you actually pick up the glue. For assembly, I used a toothpick, a glass board, which I took from an empty picture frame I had at home, and super glue. I taped a piece of plastic to my glass board to avoid making a mess with the glue, a skill that I missed by skipping preschool. This gives me a secure flat surface to work on, and I use the toothpick to apply very tiny amounts of glue because again, these parts are extremely small. Sometimes the glue doesn't hold immediately, so there is a lot of hold, wait, don't breathe. Okay, now it's stuck. Oh no, wait, it isn't. And repeat. I also use the sharp end of the toothpick to scrape away excess glue so it doesn't ruin any detail that I want to paint later. Now for the fun part, building the bases. I'm using milliput, which is a 2-part epoxy putty. You mix the 2 parts together until the color is even, and then you have a limited time before it hardens. I shape the putty directly onto the base to create texture and raised areas. I mostly use my fingers because I feel like I have more control, but there are silicone tip sculpting tools and brushes that you can use if that works better for you. And I'm also careful not to leave fingerprints everywhere. Milliput is fantastic, but also unforgiving. Once it dries, it's rock solid. My advice? Have a vision for your final base, mix small portions of milliput, and be quick. You see, some people can totally skip this part. The vision just comes to them while they're sculpting, and they're quick about it, but I'm not one of those people. This being my first time ever sculpting, I had to make sure my vision could actually work and that the final look of my base would be in harmony with my color palette, my miniatures backstory, and the overall vibe before even I reach for the putty. So I did what no artist would do. I did the despicable thing. I asked AI to generate an image for me.
God! No! God, please, no! No!
This is the reference I gave it, and this is what it generated. Now that I was sure my vision works, I needed the materials. Unfortunately, I wasn't lucky to find the miniature crystal rocks that I was looking for, so I tapped into my inner Slytherin, and I got resourceful. I used the plastic frames the miniatures originally came on as raw material, cut them into different lengths, and tried to create diamond-shaped cuts, which is harder than it sounds because if you're not careful, it's just gonna look like broken sticks. This part takes patience and very steady hands. While the milliput was still soft, I positioned the demonettes on their bases, and afterward pressed the diamonds into the milliput and let it dry for the rest of the day. For priming, I used an Airbrush airbrush, I set up a simple spray booth using a cardboard box and mounted the models using cork, Blu-Tack, and toothpicks so I could hold them without touching the paint. After lots of experimenting and messing up one miniature, I finally figured out my golden airbrush formula. Before doing anything, add 1 to 2 drops of airbrush thinner into the cup. Then add 5 to 6 drops of paint. Here I'm using the Leia White Primer. And add 1 to 2 drops of flow improver. It's very important to add the thinner first, or you will clog the needle. To mix it, I put my finger in front of the nozzle and gently push down the trigger to bubble the mixture. Do not pull back the trigger yet. And yes, I did all these mistakes. If a mistake happens, stop, empty the cup, clean it, flush it with water, and start again. Luckily, I had my husband there to rescue my poor miniature while I kept working. Here you can see him baptizing my demonettes with water to wash the paint off before it dries.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Now, every time you run out of paint in your cup, you have to wash your cup before refilling it. I'm using squeeze sauce bottle with pointed spout for precise dispensing of water inside my paint cup. Same as mixing the paint, you can put your finger in front of the nozzle and push down the trigger to bubble the water. Then use an old brush to brush off the rest of the paint stuck in the cup and dump the water. Repeat the process until the cup is clean. Cleaning the internal component of an airbrush is absolutely essential after each session of painting, and that's why a lot of people actually prefer to paint their whole army or unit in one go. To do so, clean the paint cup, remove the needle and nozzle caps, and clean them with a brush. After removing nozzle cap, you should be able to see the nozzle. You can remove the nozzle with a wrench or carefully with your fingers like so. If the paint has already dried on your nozzle like ours, you need to let it sit in isopropyl alcohol for a few minutes before using a sewing needle to clean inside of it. But make sure you don't bend it or you'll need a new one. Next, remove the handle and pull out this long needle like so and clean it. This is a delicate labor-intensive work, so naturally I assigned it to my husband and he delivered. Some parts of the milliput base were hard to reach with the airbrush, so I hand primed those areas with a brush. This makes sure the paint sticks properly and doesn't flake off later. Once miniatures dried, everything was finally ready for the next phase. And that's where I leave it for this video. This is meant to be a long series as I will paint each miniature individually and apply different painting techniques on each one. So if you're interested, make sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.